We have our next item is unfinished business. Consider approval for annexation and zoning assignment B5. I think the first question that I have is I need to understand staff's position on this issue of notification and signage. Do you have any comments about that? Or do you need to defer to someone else on staff?
We need legal to weigh in on that.
I'm sorry.
I said legal needs to weigh in on that.
Do we have a representative from legal here?
But the way that we interpreted that, because I was a part of that, is that because when the statute reads that requires notification, we do not notify the same way for an ordinance, which is the resolution would be that kind of vehicle, in the planning commission like we would do in the city commission. So that is how we've interpreted that statute, or that part of the statute. We have, and Callie can verify this, but we have acted in what we feel as though our interpretation of the statute, meaning that the one thing that we do ahead of the statute is we do notify for the planning commission meeting, and then we, when it comes to posting the property, because you have the way it works is that you have to pass the city commission has to pass a resolution. And so we're not going to post the property until that resolution is passed, just like we do not bring it before you as an annexation until we get the request to proceed from the city commission. So our system has steps in it that kind of get from one to another. I feel like I'm...
Okay, let me ask some
Okay.
questions to see if I can understand. This issue was first raised at the city commission some time ago, and that's what then put it onto our agenda. Is that correct?
Yes. Do you have the timeline? Okay. All right, there's not a timeline. You know the
I know
time.
the
Yeah,
timeline.
okay, then timeline's fine. So the way we have processes for annexation, like there's a step-by-step. So the commission has to say yes to proceed initially, and that's what kicks it to planning commission. So in our minds, that's when we notify the public. We're not required by statute to notify the public until the first public hearing. We only notify for legal cases, for the legal proceedings when we get to city commission. That would not happen until we get to the preliminary resolution. And then we would post the legal ad, which is also when we post the property.
Okay.
Is that the way we've,
That is the way we've been doing it since the statute has changed.
So
since it changed?
Since it changed. It changed it changed in July, and we actually started doing this in May. We did it preemptively before the statute. We knew it was coming, so we started with the Whitehead annexation. We did all the parts that we could, including posting that property before we had this change in statute.
But to be clear, this property on Bobby, this has not been posted.
It has not been posted because because it's not that part of the step.
Okay. So I think and this comes out, so the plain reading, I mean, I know Mr. Sells has brought this up. I mean, the plain reading, I mean, I would, absent counsel from legal, the plain reading of the statute would seem to support what Mr. Sells is saying. And I think the intent is that that the public is aware. Now, I think we have had a discussion as a planning commission and involving staff as well, following a meeting that we held at the Langston Center several months ago. And I forget exactly which matter we were discussing, but the matter was an annexation with assigned zoning to it. And I think we were all, there were quite a few comments from, I think, a number of us, where we were uncomfortable with the annexation and the assignment of zoning deviating from what is our typical process when we're contemplating a zoning that's rezoning a parcel that's already within the city, where we do post that. And there is an opportunity for public comment. So, in the interest, I think, in where we were coming from there, and even if and I think the statute, and again, my plain reading would be that we're supposed to do it, but in the spirit, even if we're not, and there's a why would we not anyway, so that we can say, well, we've given the public every opportunity to be aware of what's happening and comment on it before it actually gets recommended for approval or, by the Planning Commission.
The counter that I would say to that is that the way that I understand that is that the city commission is the body that takes in annexation. You guys are a recommending body for zoning as well as the plan of services. And because they have checks along the way to say, yep, we still want to do this, yes, we still want to do this, yes, we still want to do this. So the way I see it is that your recommendation is another check along the way. And so we post it because posting and legal ads do have a cost, and we do not charge for an annexation whatsoever. That posting is something that I think that we were taking as, this is when we should post the property because it's really going forward. Because up until, so that we've notified the adjoining property owners before Planning Commission. We let you guys make some decisions, then that gets taken to the City Commission, where when they say, yes, we want to go ahead with this preliminary resolution, then we post the property. And you're saying you would like that done.
We're failing to understand the distinction between, quite simply, Whitney, when we're rezoning a piece of property, that piece of property is posted, it's notified before it comes to the Planning Commission. People are aware that there is a meeting. People are aware that something's happening on that property. And that gives folks an opportunity to have their say, to let us, to let folks know at every point in the process, whether they support it, whether they don't support it. I think from our perspective, we would feel much more comfortable, knowing that folks had that opportunity to be aware that something was happening. I do struggle with, and again, I think we're particularly struggling with zoning is this way, and by the way, when we're annexing things, something we're assigning zoning
yes.
as well. I struggle personally with understanding why we would treat that differently.
And I got a message that legal will be here in a matter of minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
May I suggest that we table this agenda item to the end of the agenda and move on to the next item, and we'll discuss this perhaps when the legal
This
counsel
applies
arrives.
to more than one of our agenda items.
But I think perhaps the next item, rezoning of Dalewood Drive.
Hasn't
You
that,
said there was a couple of them, right?
Well,
has this been posted, Price?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
so why did we post one and not the other?
This
Because
is a
the other one is-
rezoning, the other one's an annexation.
Yeah,
And I think with Commissioner Dutton, Commissioner Dutton's point, we're getting confused with the two separate ways. I believe that's what's getting.
Well, I think where we're getting it again, this one has been notified, but the other one hasn't, because it's an annexation, but even though there's a zoning assignment that goes with it, so that is a rezoning often with the parcel, because we're zoning it to whatever someone would like, and it certainly is.
Now, wait a minute. They are,
Gentlemen, let's hold this till the end of the agenda. Go ahead with item number 1 under new business, Bryce, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Bryce McNamer, planner with the Development Services Department. This is a request for your consideration for rezoning at 134 Dalewood Drive. We're looking, once again, to the far east of the city. This is the Johnson City Municipal Airport property, Watauga Road, as you go out to the city of Watauga itself. This is the site of a past rezoning, Heidi's House of Hope, right here. Our subject property is highlighted in red here, as you can see on the zoomed-in view here. The request is to rezone one parcel of 2.4 acres from I-2 heavy industrial to R2 low-density residential. This is simply to establish a conformity between the zoning and the existing use. There is an existing single-family house on this property. Oddly enough, there is a concept plan required for this rezoning because it is adjacent to other R2 properties. And as the code reads, a rezoning that is directly adjacent to a single-family district or use is required a concept plan. However, with this being for the purpose of conformity and no proposed development, we have used the existing conditions map to fulfill this requirement. The requested zoning, it does not require any changes. It is already going to meet the standards of the R2 with setbacks and and lot coverage and those things. So as always, significant changes of an approved concept plan will require an amendment. However, with this one being in existing conditions, any single-family permit that's typically processed for an R2 or a single-family lot such as accessory structure or home occupation or something like that, we're not going to consider that a significant change from the concept plan. As mentioned, the current zoning is I2. There's the adjacent R2 right here. The existing house sits right on the border of the I2 and the R2. The applicant actually owns this property and this property, so her vacant property is residential. Her residential property is industrial. Current land use also shows the existing single-family residential uses along Watauga Road and a lot of vacant property as you go down south of Dalewood. You do see existing residential uses as you go down south on Rowland, but this is our single-family use here. You can see a few more spotted down here. Future land use map does not recognize the residential uses on the south side of Watauga. It uses the center line of Watauga as it's split between residential and industrial future land uses. The Horizon 2045 plan is very similar to that. As mentioned in the workshop, the intention is to not automatically assume the loss of industrial property. We would consider each of those applications on a case-by-case basis. Obviously, with the industrial place type, there's very low appropriate levels for residential uses. The neighborhood meeting was held on March 27th. There were letters sent out prior to that meeting, and the signs were posted on the property. There was one attendee at the neighborhood meeting. Staff did receive a few more phone calls, all of which were in favor of the request to see it staying the same and preserving the house. Staff recommends approval of this rezoning because it will bring the existing use into conformity, and the proposed R2 is directly adjacent to the property.
Any questions for staff?
What prompted this rezoning request, do you know? I mean, if he didn't change, it doesn't change anything since he's living there.
The applicant would like conformity, and that was what prompted
Is there
this.
going to be modifications to the proposed land use plan in order to, you can't take an R and change this to R2 and then with the proposed land use have industrial on both sides of it. It'd be a spot zoning in the middle. So the land use plan is going to have to be changed in order to extend that conformity to Watauga.
Right. Well, like I said, the existing industrial uses that we are anticipating include all the residential uses on here, not just this one. So
I'm talking about the proposed, the land use map that's where it's proposed to be I2, not what its current use, its current zoning is.
Correct. This Horizon 2045 one? Proposed land use, future
Right.
land use map?
Right.
Correct. And like I said, we're taking this into account because there is an existing single-family residence there, bringing that into conformity.
Okay, so you're kind of moving that I2, proposed I2, and removing that and just leaving it as R2, correct?
We can make the future land use map consistent with that, I would expect. Right.
We can still go back. It's not been adopted yet.
Yeah, right, exactly. I think that was just that line was just our best guess.
Did the property with the parking lot have to do a particular type of buffer right now because the house is there, or because it is I2, they did not, but if we change it, they will?
This house has been here, it predates zoning, it was built in the 1930s. I'm not sure when the parking lot was built. It does not appear that there is a buffer, but we can check with the applicant to verify that.
Yeah, well, just for a future, if they sell
It
the
would
house.
go, yeah, with it being R2, if something came in here, they would be required a buffer.
Okay,
Directly next to it.
yeah.
They would be
Not-
required that now because a single-family use is a low impact by itself, no matter what district. R2 just solidifies that.
Great.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you, Mr. McNamer. You can have a seat. I'll open the floor for public comment. Is anyone here to speak to the question? Is the property owner here? Seeing none, I'll close the floor for public. Did you raise your hand? Do you have any comments you'd like to share with us? Thank you. I'll close the floor. Thank you for that. I'll close the floor. Discussion amongst us. Seems fairly straightforward to me.
What do you think?
I think given that there is already a home on the property, it makes a lot of sense to make this conforming with zoning. So I would go ahead and make a motion to rezone 134 Dalewood Drive from I-2 to R2.
Second.
All right, I have a motion to rezone 134 Dalewood Drive from heavy industrial I-2 to R2 low-density residential as it currently exists. Any other questions or discussion? Ms. Heather, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Hunter,
Yes.
Commissioner Aldridge,
Yes.
Commissioner Cooper,
Yes.
Commissioner Oshenbein,
Yes.
Commissioner Goodson,
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly,
Yes.
Commissioner Williams,
Yes.
Vice Chair Dutton,
Yes.
Chairman Dagenhart.
Yes. Thank you very much. The next item up for agenda is you again, Mr. McNamara.
Our next rezoning this evening is rezoning of property on Bristol Highway and Creekmore Drive. Once again, the highlighted red area here, this is the split of Roan and Bristol Highway, East Oakland, and the merge of State of Franklin with Bristol Highway here. And this would be Creekmore Drive, directly behind the Johnson City Toyota property. We are looking at this highlighted portion here. The request is to rezone a portion of one parcel measuring at 5.72 acres from R4 medium density residential to B4 planned arterial business. This is to accommodate development of a future parking area for the adjacent car dealership. The requested area is anticipating conveyance to the Johnson City Toyota property, but they would like to get that rezoned. There is a concept plan required from this, from being adjacent to a single-family house. This depicts the parking area with no new structures and access to the back end of the Johnson City Toyota property. There will be buffer yards required. This is a single-family residence here, so there is a type 2 buffer requirement. The rest of this borders R4 zoning, so it's one step down and go to a type 1 buffer. This does meet the standards of the B4 zoning district. Once again, any major changes would follow a concept plan amendment process. The current conditions of the site are quite interesting. This does not have road frontage. It is actually going to be a portion of a parcel that is conveyed over to another parcel. So the majority of the area is over in here, but they will be drawing a line and using this part, combining it here. So it does not have any road frontage at this time. Once conveyed, and if conveyed, it would be given road frontage from the property. There is an unnamed stream that flows into the stormwater pond here. This is at the low elevation. It climbs back up as you go here, and it's a little bit more intense as you're on the southern side of that. Utilities are not available directly in this area. They're available along Creekmore Drive and along Bristol Highway. With the proposed parking lot only being used by the existing car dealership, this is not going to generate any additional traffic or actual open to the public and customer traffic back here. So there will not be a traffic study performed. As mentioned, the current zoning is R4. The adjacent zoning is also R4 as you move to the north and to the east, and it is B4 directly around the Bristol Highway frontage as well as the Creekmore Drive frontage. There's a plethora of lot line and zoning line mix-ups and discrepancies in this area. So this one single-family house here, the lot lines do not line up to this, so that's why this piece is being taken in. This piece right here is actually part of this property. So part of this property is also B4 with this stretch. And then this portion of the requested area is actually already part of the Johnson City Toyota property. And like I mentioned, this will be drawing a new lot line here. So we will be getting more conforming zoning and lot lines as a result of this, but the requested zoning is B4, which would match the use of the car dealership. Current land use defines this as a single-family residential. However, that is more directed to the far north. The actual portion requested is in the single-family, or it is vacant. There is nothing up here at this time. And then obviously we have commercial uses along the arterial and collector roads here. Future land use defines this area as appropriate for future commercial uses. This includes all properties along the Bristol Highway and Creekmore Drive, and then keeps the residential uses to the north along Shannon Lane and off of those major roads. The future land use map from Horizon 2045 is, there's a bit of discrepancies. This is another one that staff has talked about, where you have existing commercial uses in this area that are notated with the neighborhood residential. And then with the zoning, you have a lot of B4 here with the zoning line discrepancies, where half of them are arterial business, half of them are residential. But this portion would just extend this, and it appears that a portion of this is within the red color here. There's little on the bridge plan specifically about this condition, but to provide expansion and protection for the commercial and industrial areas, encouraging growth of the city's tax base within the land use element. Neighborhood meeting was held for this, letters were sent, and signs were posted on the frontage as well as directly on the property to cover all bounds. The neighborhood meeting was held on March 31st. There were 0 attendees. We did receive one comment from the owner of the single-family residence that was in the pocket of R4 up on the hill directly next to this one with the type 2 buffer adjacent. Had issues and concerns about the stormwater drainage possibilities and with past issues about an existing water meter in line in a location, as well as concern for the noise created from the vehicles parking. With that being said, staff recommends approval of the proposed rezoning because it will eliminate the split zone condition of the lot and establish a lot more conformity with the zoning lines in this area. The proposed B4 district is already adjacent and applied to a portion in the little sliver of this property. This does still maintain adequate space of residential zoning along Shannon Lane farther off to act as a transitional zone down to single family and other residential uses farther away from the collector road. And the concept plan depicts a supplementary use that would be used by the existing use and is not introducing new commercial uses, as well as providing a buffer that was not already there for any future residential uses that would not be required to have a buffer.
Thank you, Mr. McNamer. Any questions for staff?
Actually, Mr. McNamer, yes. Has the applicant completed a wetlands delineation yet?
No. So with the concept plan and with this being a B4 and it will be a new lot line and a replat, this will have to come back to you as the subdivision site plan requirement within the requirements of the B4. Once a site plan is completed upon subdividing, they will have to come back to the Planning Commission once again to evaluate the stream and the specifics.
Gotcha. So the wetlands will be delineated before it comes back again?
Yeah, on the final site plan review.
Has the applicant and the applicant's engineer discussed how they're going to, I mean, they're essentially, and this is curiosity as much as anything, but I assume, as you pointed out, it's kind of an interesting site aside from the lot lines. There's plenty of contours there, so you're going to cut to fill and fill in that creek, which is what the concept plan shows. I think the proposed elevations that run across it. How are they going to handle drainage?
That will be another issue that will be reviewed by Public Works and Engineering at the time of the site plan.
Okay.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you, Mr. McNamer. I'll open the floor for public comment. I see we have a representative here of the developer of for the project, Ms. Walker.
Good evening. I'm Marcy Walker. My address is 1602 Millbrook Drive in Johnson City, Tennessee. I'm an attorney for Hunter Smith and Davis Law Firm, and I represent the purchaser of this property. I don't know if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer them if I can. I can tell you that right now, They would like to have the property rezoned prior to the time that they purchase the property. They're not really sure when or if they're going to, the only thing that they want to do with this is to have some parking so that they can use, like when their new cars come in, that they have a place to store them. So I don't really think there's going to be noise from that. There are no plans ever to put any kind of building. The contours out there are very difficult, very challenging, and they do understand that prior to doing any kind of construction, even for parking, that they are going to have to come back here with a plan that shows how they're going to deal with the water and wetlands. And so they understand that. They just, as I say, they didn't want to buy the property knowing that it couldn't be rezoned, and they'll deal with those challenges once they decide they want to build on it.
So the existing owner is willing to rezone it?
Yes.
Okay. It's going to be an expensive parking lot.
Might be.
Thank you very much. Anyone else to speak in favor or against the question? I'll close the floor for public comment. Now the question resides with us, gentlemen and ladies.
Mr. Chairman, I feel like it's a reasonable request. It eliminates the split zoning. It's an appropriate land use. It's in line with the future land use plan, and I'll make the motion to approve the rezoning from R4 to B4.
Second.
All right, I have a motion to approve the rezoning at Creekmore Drive on Bristol Highway from R4 to B4, and I have a second. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mayor Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Aldridge?
Yes.
Commissioner Cooper?
Yes.
Commissioner Oshenbein?
Yes.
Commissioner Goodson?
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly?
Yes.
Commissioner Williams?
Yes.
Vice Chair Dutton?
Yes.
Chairman Dagenhart?
Yes. All right, thank you very much, Mr. McNamara. I think you're up one more time.
Here all night. Okay, this is changing it up a little bit from our rezonings here. This is a request for your consideration for text amendments to the Johnson City Zoning Code regarding the industrial districts and introducing the use of data centers. For some background considerations, what staff has been looking to solve over the few months and with looking into this prior to bringing it for you tonight. 5 reasonably simple questions for a non-simple matter. What is a data center and how is it defined? How does cryptocurrency work into this? Where should data centers be permitted? What are the concerns and the nuisances caused by data centers? And what mitigation efforts can be taken to limit these negative effects? And when staff is looking at this, we are reviewing a lot of different ordinances and a lot of different research that has been done from other municipalities that have passed prior regulations in hopes to find common ground and see what proper regulations would look like and what we can apply into our own code. We've looked at many and many of different codes and ordinances. The shadowed text indicates a city ordinance. The regular text indicates a county ordinance. We started in the south and then kind of expanded across to see what other regions would have to offer. Many different ordinances and many different things to consider. So some background for this: data centers can take many forms and different types of uses. Mainly what they are is large housings of network computers or servers, many synonyms for those. They typically have a lot of air conditioning and a lot of cooling units. Many network racks, as we can see these with the server rooms, generators, HVAC units, fans, et cetera, to keep the technology cool, as well as some are completely unmanned, some are not. There are some that actually have staff, whether that's just mechanical or engineers to fix things, or actual offices. Those are typically seen in these. Looking at some different exteriors of these buildings, we have seen that these can be gigantic, massive warehouse that is a single structure. We've also seen more modern forms of these that take up many different smaller structures. So there's many different ways that these can be developed around the country and around the world. Just once more, trying to emphasize the size of how big these data centers can be. This, I recall being from Northern Virginia, which is the known capital of the world for data centers and new regulations. You can actually have multiple of these large warehouse buildings that almost create a campus or a complex of these things. And just to explain the difference of what these physically look like on the inside between a typical data center that is not doing cryptocurrency and one that is doing cryptocurrency, such as a Bitcoin mine or something. This is a typical data center in Arizona that was for a large branch bank, and this is a crypto mine that was pictured in Texas. So first of all, our first step is to define a data center within Article 2. That is our article for the definitions section. Data center, this is all one definition. I've sectioned it out just for visual purposes here. Data center means property consisting of buildings or structures specifically designed or modified for digital data operations. Pretty cut and dry. We will get to the definition for digital data operations in a few slides. Defining what the associated facilities can be, so it is clear in here. As I mentioned, a lot of computer and network equipment, servers, air handlers, generators, cooling and storage facilities. They can also do substations. And then the associated uses, just reflecting what we have seen with administrative areas and offices can also be in here, so that they are supporting the primary activity. I'm not claiming to be an expert in this by any means, but cryptocurrency mining is a large component of a lot of different data centers. So very briefly, simple 5-step process. People are using Bitcoins or whatever other cryptocurrency. They purchase these. These transactions are not regulated by a federal or like a bank. They're done just by a computer program. So when someone uses crypto, these transactions are pooled into a block within a computer program. The cryptocurrency miners who are using these data centers or other techniques are solving the cryptographic problems that are generated by the computer program. Once that is done, the transaction itself is verified and added to the ledger, which is self-verified by the Bitcoin miners. So that is known as the blockchain, which is a decentralized ledger. And then a reward of a very small form of cryptocurrency is then given to the miner. So that is essentially the trade-off, is that they verify transactions, they get a Bitcoin, or a portion of a Bitcoin. So moving into definitions, these are supplemental definitions that all tie together with data center. Digital data operations, as was directly under the data center definition, means storage, management, processing, and/or transmission of digital data. This includes cryptocurrency mining. Moving into cryptocurrency mining, the process that I generally explained by which crypto transactions are verified and added to the public ledger, known as the blockchain, and also the means through which new units of crypto are released through the use of data centers. So all three of these definitions tie back together. More of our research outside of defining cryptocurrency and data centers surrounds what type of zoning district these are typically permitted in and what is most appropriate, as well as the possibility of a special exception. Staff's research has found that these are typically permitted by right in an industrial district, more specifically a medium or a heavy industrial district. With Johnson City's zoning code, we have light and heavy, so I-1 and I-2. In some cases, data centers have been permitted as a special exception in a light industrial area or in other different quasi-industrial manufacturing areas of that nature. And then, as mentioned again with Northern Virginia as an example, places with a higher demand and a higher concentration of data centers have actually created entirely new overlay districts for these data centers when they have so many of them to concentrate them together. So staff has taken away that the I-2 heavy industrial district is the most appropriate to add this as a permitted use. You see the provided is added here. We'll get to those additional criteria here in a minute. The only existing definition that could have been contemplated as a data center would have been business park district. The definition in there was computer and data processing services was the permitted use. However, it was not defined in Article 2, so it leaves open a lot of contemplation. We have replaced that with reserved, which just acts as a placeholder if a business park district wants to develop at some point in the future, and we could look back into permitting a data center within that district. So with the permitted district being I2, and all commissioners have been given the large handout of the existing industrial zone properties from the GIS department. The darker purple is going to be your I1. The lighter purple is going to be your I2, which would be the permitted zoning district for data centers. So we can see on this map that by putting it in I2, we automatically exclude Gray and Boones Creek. There is a very, very small tidbit off of State of Franklin. That is the large furniture store. But it is a split zone and already has an existing structure. A lot of the I2 is confined to this side. This would be Watauga, Unaka, and Watauga here. We are sitting about right here right now. So it is really confined to this area of the city as well as the southern side of the city on the South Roan corridor. Just to go through this and identify some of these places that are closer to the downtown core: Tannery Knobs, city-owned; Iris Glen, city-owned. The Johnson City Municipal Airport property is up here, but this also includes a few other properties around there. You'll see around State of Franklin here, some of these slivers. These are remnants from leftover railroad zoning that, as rezonings came in, they just never got updated. So no developable area on those small slivers there. The ETSU baseball field is right here. There is a small pocket far out on West Market Street with some existing I2 zoning with existing buildings. We have Leif Cox Drive down Leif Cox Drive and Buffalo Road in this area. And then the Buffalo Mountain Industrial Park, as well as Borla Industries on the very, very far side of town. Looking back into our research for the possible nuisances, we've heard in the news and we've heard from many different sources and past developments of these things that this has caused major issues with noise. There have also been concerns about utility usage and blackouts. We also took a look at traffic just to make sure. But as mentioned, when these have come in without proper regulations, these cause major issues, especially for surrounding properties and surrounding residences, specifically because of the noise and the consistent noise and the consistent vibrations that are done by these things and the facilities here. These are typically going to be high users of electricity and water, electricity to run the servers, water to cool them. As far as traffic, generation is low as these are relatively unmanned. As mentioned, they might have an office or something, but there's not a whole lot of manpower going on. It's really automated. So looking into the mitigation of the negative impacts, what we set out to research here is what are proper setbacks and buffers, distance from lower impact uses especially, trying to get that farther away from residences in which way we can, as well as what does screening look like for exterior mechanical equipment. So what we found is that in light industrial districts, by special exception, typically additional setbacks are required. Almost all the time there's an increased setback if you're directly adjacent to residential uses. Buffers should be a wall or a fence. There are specific ordinances in other municipalities about noise reduction barriers and the specifics of what each noise barrier has to be made of by material. Exterior mechanical equipment is typically necessary with HVAC fans and keeping these things cool, and requires screening. So looking back, as mentioned, this was put into the I2 as a permitted use, but it has that provided tag on it. So a site plan would have to be submitted and the following criteria would have to be met on top of it being a permitted use only in the I2. So the first of which is pretty common language that is used in our industrial districts. However, we have changed this from obnoxious noise and changed it to directly relating to the chapter of the noise of the Code of Ordinances that talks about noise, as well as including the existing wording of vibrations, smoke, gas, fumes, odors, dust, and fire hazards. This gives staff a little bit of discrepancy to decide on whether these things are actually causing a problem. There's not a specific ordinance that notates each of these, but it allows us and our mechanisms to review what the nuisances are. All digital data operations are contained within closed buildings. We do allow the exterior mechanical equipment, as is typical with any other industrial development. However, the digital data operations itself, which was its own definition, are contained within a closed building. That just gives us a first level of screening for the primary use and to make sure that they are within a structure. To the residential uses, all facilities shall not be located within 200 feet of a residential use or district. We went a little bit farther than to just say single family, because these can affect multifamily and mobile homes and townhouses all the same. Everybody would be impacted by any possible noise. So any district that permits single family residences or dwellings, that would be your R1 through 5, the RPs. RM 3 through 5 would be your manufactured home districts, as well as B3 and RO1, those types of things, anything that has a single family residence permitted by right. So this would be made from the nearest property line, or if there's a discrepancy, the zoning line from that district or that property to the nearest facility of the data center. So if it's across the road, you could count the road, but it would still be 200 feet away from the property itself. Where we cannot require screening on a front yard, we would only have a landscape yard. The front setback would adhere to what a typical I-2 development would be on an arterial road, and that would be 60 feet. A type 4 buffer yard is provided on all side and rear property lines. In the case that it directly adjoins a residential use, referring back to the residential districts that were notated in requirement C, which was the longer paragraph here. What the type 4 buffer yard does, it is the only buffer yard, it's 35 feet in width, but it's the only buffer yard that explicitly requires a physical barrier, and you do not have the option to do trees or barrier. You have to do a barrier. So with the case that there is an I-2 directly adjacent to a residential property or use, you would have to have some sort of physical barrier there as a requirement. Now, the last two are mentioning exterior equipment. Ground-mounted equipment shall be located on the side or rear yards, not within the setbacks, screened on all sides, and making sure this screening is exceeding the height, so we're not just screening half of it and the noise is still escaping as much. Exceed the height of any equipment by a minimum of 6 inches. Essentially, the same regulations for roof or wall-mounted equipment. However, if they put fans on the roof, and is noted here, if unfeasible, that'd be us requiring them to put a brick wall or a wood fence on a roof. Unfeasible, use of the same building materials can be used as screening, and once again, this must exceed the height of the equipment. Looking at additional amendments within the I-1, this will go back to the I-2. There is a very long list of this, also with the word objectionable is not enforceable enough. So changing this to be simplistic and to be consistent with what is said within the data centers definition and within the I-2, directly relating to the noise ordinance here, keeping that same list, and then with the I-1, operations are contained within closed buildings. And we'll go over to I-2, essentially taking this, staying consistent with the wording, referencing the noise ordinance, but allowing extraction and mining processes. I-2, you do not have to be in a closed building because that is the heavy industrial district, so you're allowed to be a little bit more intense. So additional amendments for I-1 and I-2, this is within the section of protecting surrounding areas. This is how it read initially, the city engineer being required or may require additional submittals for stormwater and traffic. We have changed that to the Director of Development Services, city engineer, or a designee may require additional submittals for that stormwater drainage, traffic, and sound impacts. So that would give us the authority to go out and ask for additional submittals to evaluate these things. Looking at future work, because the zoning code is a development document, these are almost different, in a separate ordinance sometimes can be required. Within the noise ordinance, we are currently looking at different amendments that can specifically address the humming and the consistency of the vibration. As the noise ordinance works now, as long as you don't exceed, as you see this, as long as you don't exceed this decibel number, you're fine, and it can be consistently 1 decibel under that number for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. What we are currently looking into and working with administration and with the legal department is implementing a section within the noise ordinance that would require a noise study to be performed for each data center. It would essentially work like a traffic impact analysis, and you would take the recommendations and then apply them to the submitted site plan for the data center. We do not have that completed right now, but we are at least putting a Band-Aid on a risk that we're taking by not having any regulations on these. We have been working on a request for qualifications and sending it out to find out more information from professionals in the acoustic engineering field about sound travel and measurement, as well as even more in-depth mitigation techniques and further guidance on regulation and the strategies we can be taking. That's pretty short. In conclusion, staff proposes to amend the zoning code. They recommend approval. To add new definitions of the 3 that we talked about: data centers, digital data operations, and cryptocurrency mining. Those would all be added into Article 2. Updating the I-2 to permit data centers with additional requirements and remove the contemplatable computer and data processing services within the unestablished business park district. Those would be to Article 6, as well as maintaining consistent wording for manufacturing processes with that list of obnoxious noise, vibrations, etc., within both the I-2 and the I-1, and including that same wording within the additional criteria for data centers. And lastly, within the protection of surrounding areas, giving staff the authority to require additional submittals for sound impacts until we have that noise ordinance updated.
Thank you, Mr. McNamara. I do have one question. One infrastructure asset that a data center might tax in our community, not a street, not a water system, but the electrical grid. Do you have any sense of the compatibility of I-2 to the electrical grid capacity? Did you find any regulations in any other communities that dealt with how to manage or how to foresee grid reliability with that kind of additional load?
There are specifics in some different ordinances, and all zoning codes and development codes and unified development codes, and they're all set up differently. Sometimes they're just land use based, sometimes they have other input in there. We did not specifically find anything about regulation of an electrical grid pertaining to data centers. There might be a different ordinance and it's not within the zoning code. I do not believe it would be applicable to our zoning code, as we do not have anything in there. It would be reviewed and processed by Bright Ridge. I'm sure they would be in contact if to develop.
Certainly, thank you. Other questions?
I have one question regarding your requirements around some of the residential zoning. You didn't have in there R4. This would be as difficult to live next to if I was living in an apartment as it would be in a house. Why did you exclude that?
So as this reads, within any residential use or district, this includes any zoning district that permits single-family residences or dwellings, and R4 permits a single-family residence.
Okay, I guess I would describe that as multifamily.
Right, but if single-family is permitted, and how residential zoning works is that anything permitted in R3 is permitted in R2 is permitted in R1.
Okay,
so
so it
everything
would
in
be
R1
included.
goes all the way up to R6.
It would be included then?
Yes.
Okay.
In your research, Did you discover any significant difference in the noise issue between crypto and just a plain old vanilla data center?
I did not. Now, there have been, I think it's been more publicized with issues being surrounding a crypto center. With a typical data center, they can be done by Google or Amazon or an extremely large company that probably has a lot of funds to fund a large-scale development and have all those assets, whereas cryptocurrency could have just been a startup. So I think that's probably when these first started coming around, they had a lot of issues because they were, one, not regulated, and they were two, they did not know exactly how to build them in compatibility to the surrounding area. But between data center without cryptocurrency and with cryptocurrency, the noise is no different. As you saw with that picture and showing Arizona and Texas, they essentially do the same thing on the inside.
Yeah, but the outside's the issue. I mean, the computers don't make that much noise. It's like you said earlier, the HVAC equipment, the infrastructure, if you will. I would encourage you to really pursue that acoustic angle, and sooner or later, I think we've got to get some pretty good teeth into our codes related to that. 6 inches above the equipment doesn't necessarily solve much of the acoustic problem, especially if the facility is in a lower piece of property and residents might be up on the side of a ridge.
Yeah, and that would go into a noise study theoretically as they take into account the topography, something that the zoning code itself.
I think there's a lot of work to do there.
Yes.
The idea of a noise study I thought was a fantastic idea, and recognizing though the need to move forward with something now to help mitigate risk.
Bryce, great job.
Thank you.
You've stood up there for a long time.
Very
Thank
well
you.
researched and presented. Thank you very much.
I do have one more question before you sit. I saw that we have a recommendation for a front setback of 60 feet. Was there a reason why we don't have side and rear setbacks, and was that consistent with the other codes that you researched?
So with our existing requirements for setbacks, the sides, it's likely going to be, well, especially on the sides and the rear, we can require a buffer if there's a difference in zoning district. When you're on the front, we don't put buffers up against public streets. It's just a landscape yard. So if we can reflect that by stepping it back a little bit, still not going to be having any screening, but all the mechanical equipment is going to be confined to the side and the rear yards, and you would have some sort of buffer theoretically. So the step back is in the place of what we could require as a buffer.
If they have a case where the decibels are higher than those that are permitted, would they have an option on that to consider some kind of sound buffering as an alternative, which would protect the surrounding area, but be maybe pretty noisy on the inside?
Yeah, how the noise ordinance works is that it's measured from the receiving property of the noise. So within a house, as long as my noise is not exceeding my property, it can be extremely loud in there, as long as nobody else is hearing it. But if you are exceeding the noise, what these decibel numbers here, that is what would be measured from the adjacent property line. And that would just be a code enforcement mechanism. They would be the ones to guide that.
Just a quick question. So the cooling units are they on top of the building or inside the building?
We typically see a lot of roof cooling units so the heat can rise straight out. There's other ways to cool them. You can dip them in oil or have some water cooling system in the floor that might be a little less noisy, but probably a lot more expensive. There's a lot of HVAC units that just sit outside. Sometimes the HVAC units can go on the roof. As we see on large big box stores, you'll have a lot of different units sitting on the roof. But we have seen that a lot of the cooling and the noise is being made from the exterior, and that's where the last 2 points in that provided list come from, with requiring the screening on all sides.
Mayor, typically, given the size and the capacity required for these facilities, the real significant noise generators are sitting on the ground. Cooling towers, fluid coolers, those types of things.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McNamara, for the presentation. Is anyone here to speak to the question? If there is, I'll open the floor for public comment. Show of hands. Seeing none, I won't open the floor. So the question now resides with us. I think Mr. McNamara has done a fantastic job researching this. It's not complete. There's work yet to be done, but he's on a good start.
No, I agree, and again, I think recognizing the need that we feel that absent absent a text amendment, we're somewhat exposed. So I mean, even that we know there's a little bit more work to come, specifically as it pertains to requiring a noise study. But this is a big step in the right direction.
Any other comment?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept the text amendments as relative to the industrial district and data centers as presented with the qualification that there's more work to do on the noise/acoustic portion.
I believe the plan should be that we recommend adoption of these text amendments. Is that what you
Fair
are
enough.
asking?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I have that motion to adopt and recommend adoption of the text amendments regarding data centers to the Johnson City zoning code.
Second.
And I have a second. Any further discussion? Heather, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Hunter,
Yes.
Commissioner Aldridge. Yes. Commissioner Cooper,
Yes.
Commissioner Oshenbein.
Yes.
Commissioner Goodson,
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly,
Yes.
Commissioner Williams,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Dutton,
Yes.
Chairman Dagenhart.
Yes. Thank you very much. Okay, we've got, the next item is the Becker subdivision preliminary plat. Ms. Putnam.
Good evening, Commissioners. These will be just as good presentations, just a little bit briefer. Before you today, we have a series of plats. The first one is a preliminary plat approval for the Beckner subdivision on 1305 College Heights Road. The request is to approve a preliminary plat for a 4-lot subdivision in a existing R3 zoning district, so no changes in zoning. It's R3, so they're just dividing it into 4 lots. The property is close to the ETSU campus. The football field is here, and we have a lot of student housing in the RP4, and the subject property is depicted in that circle. Just some aerial shots that I thought would help kind of get the mind of the property. You have 2 existing structures that would be on Lot 3 of the property, and each of those structures, Lot 3 has 3 existing units. So how R3 works, you're allowed 7 units per acre, and how there's no proposal of what is going, if they're single-family homes, duplexes. However, lots 1 and 2, depending by their acreage, can be up to 2 units when they do decide to develop. Lot 3 can add an additional 3 units to not exceed 6 units, and Lot 4, may have up to 10 units with 1.45 total acres. Again, there's no development proposal. This is simply just a preliminary subdivision plat. There will be sewer extension required per the cost of the developer to Lot 1, and there's no new roads or sidewalks being presented or proposed. So with that, staff recommends approval of the preliminary plat.
Right, questions for staff? Okay, we don't have public comment on preliminary plats. Any discussion amongst us?
Mr. Chairman, I think this is pretty straightforward. I would move that we recommend approval of the preliminary plat due to the plat meeting the requirements of the subdivision ordinance.
Second.
All right, I have a motion to approve the preliminary plat for the Beckner subdivision, and a second. Any further discussion? Heather, please call the roll.
Mayor Hunter,
Yes.
Commissioner Aldridge,
Yes.
Commissioner Cooper,
Yes.
Commissioner Oshenbein,
Yes.
Commissioner Goodson,
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly,
Yes.
Commissioner Williams?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Dutton?
Yes.
Chairman Dagenhart?
Yes. Okay, next up, Chestnut Valley subdivision.
This is another preliminary plat approval for a 15-lot subdivision on Chestnut Valley subdivision off of Peartown Road. The Ridges, just orient the commission, the Ridges Golf Course is adjacent to the property. The Ridges, part of the Ridges development is here, and the acreage of the 15 lots is right off of Hairtown Road. This would be a proposal for 15 single-family lot subdivision. There are proposed to have 7 driveways being shared off of Hairtown, so there's not 15 driveway cuts. Hairtown Road isn't a county road, so there is not a sidewalk requirement that will be presented and proposed for this development. With the RP5 zoning, they can have 27.2 units per acre. However, they are well under that density with just 15 single-family lots. I have a slide upcoming that kind of just shows you the topography. It is a very sloped piece of property that really prohibits the rear being developed. So that will be maintained as open space and green space. There is a walking path and cart path being proposed as well to meet that active space that is required for the RP5. So that cart path is depicted in the red with a walking trail open space area, and then the cart path connecting to the existing Ridges development and golf course area. So just to show you the steep topography, this is Hairtown Road, and the property slopes heavily upward in the rear, so the actual developable area kind of cuts that property in half and fronts on Hairtown Road. Staff recommends approval of the preliminary plat. It'll have to come back for construction plans and final plat approval at a further time.
Very good, thank you very much. Questions for staff? Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion to approve the preliminary plat as presented.
Second.
All right, I have a motion to approve the preliminary plat as presented for Chestnut Valley subdivision, and a second. Any further discussion? Heather, please call the roll.
Mayor Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Aldridge?
Yes.
Commissioner Cooper?
Yes.
Commissioner Oshinvine?
Yes.
Commissioner Goodson?
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly?
Yes.
Commissioner Williams?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Dutton?
Yes.
Chairman Dagenhart?
Yes. Thank you very much. Next item, a final plat and a right-of-way dedication.
Yes, last one. This is a final plat approval request for the Autumn Ridge Phase 2 planned unit development and right-of-way dedication. The Phase 2 is a PUD, a planned unit development of 33 units on a common lot, so there are no single-family lots. It's all just a common area with green space and open space and some right-of-way dedication that would be to local road standards. And it's along Bristol Highway here, and the Rocky Mount Historical Site is to the west of the property. And I went backwards, sorry. Just some landscape orientation. The existing Autumn Ridge is here, and the new PUD that is being final platted is along this frontage here and comes across to the cul-de-sac kind of right in there that you will see on the final plat. 33 single-family homes. There are, with an RP3 zoning, they're allowed 8.5 units per acre, which would equate to 67, so they are well under that proposed density. The property was rezoned last fall, and so this was the concept plan that was approved by both Planning and City Commission, and it matches the concept plan. Sidewalks are constructed and already in place on the roads and along Haystack Circle. Your staff reports indicated a bond amount would be presented to you at this time. However, construction is completed, so there will be no bond being required to be posted by the developer, which is something that we truly enjoy seeing. And walking trail, they meet their active space by having a walking trail come along the rear of the properties. And again, there's 1.277 acres of right-of-way that is being dedicated and will need to be approved and accepted by the Planning Commission. So due to those factors and it meeting the approved concept plan, staff recommends approval of the plat and right-of-way dedication.
All right, questions for staff? Hearing none, the question now resolves to us. Thank you, Ms. Putney.
Yes, I should keep that.
No discussion?
No. Slam dunk.
May I have a motion?
Whose turn is it?
Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the Autumn Ridge Phase 2 final plat and right-of-way dedication.
Second.
All right, I have a motion to approve the Phase 2 final plat for Autumn Ridge and a right-of-way dedication, and a second. Any further discussion? Heather, please call the roll.
Mayor Hunter,
Yes.
Commissioner Aldridge,
Yes.
Commissioner Cooper,
Yes.
Commissioner Oshinbain,
Yes.
Commissioner Goodson,
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly,
Yes.
Commissioner Williams,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Dutton,
Yes.
Chairman Dagenhart.
Yes. Thank you very much. Now we'll revisit to the item that we deferred to the end of the meeting, and that's the question about annexation and zoning of a planned community business district at 5840 Bobby Hicks Highway annexation. May I ask the city attorney to come, Callie, come up, if you'd come up, please, also. And the city attorney, could you please come up, Mr. Watson? I believe we need your guidance on a question.
I don't want you to insult Mr. Seeley by calling me the city attorney. He's
I'm sorry.
very much more handsome than I am.
I apologize.
No, that's fine.
I think we have a question around notification.
That's what I understand, and if y'all want to go ahead, I was going to put this down, but I don't want to mess anything up.
If you could give us some guidance around Tennessee annotated code requirements for notification for an annexation when it's a petition by the property owner, and then it also includes a rezoning request.
Okay. So this is a multifaceted issue because there are multiple issues within your question. So what we have is an owner-requested annexation. We also have the consideration of a plan of services, and we also have the consideration of a zoning request within that plan of services. So I'm going to break it down by each step, and hopefully we come to some kind of consensus. Otherwise, I'd be more than happy to prepare some type of written, I want to call it an opinion and give myself that much air of authority, but some type of guidance for you all in writing that might make it more clear if I'm not clear this evening. So first, starting in 13.7.203, the Tennessee Code, that speaks to the adoption of a zoning request. And in that particular code, it speaks to the chief legislative body, that being the commission. Within that particular code provision, it speaks to the chief legislative body providing a 21-day notice prior to a hearing on the rezoning. So that would cover the zoning notice and requirements for purposes of the zoning or a rezoning request. 651, well, I'll try to go, well, now I started with the biggest number, now I'm going backwards. 651-104 of the Tennessee Code speaks to the annexation. So the annexation portion of that particular adoption procedure speaks to the resolution, the recommended annexation or proposed annexation resolution. With respect to the actual resolution, we are required to provide a 21-day notice, including that resolution in the mail, posting it in 3 public places near or around the territory as it relates to that proposed annexation that's embodied in the resolution, and then within the newspaper of general circulation within the municipality. Obviously, you all know what the newspaper is, but Johnson City Press or something of the like. We also, prior to the consideration by the municipality of the resolution for annexation, we have to post requisite signage around the property as well. So that's another subpart of that particular statute. As to the plan of services, if you look at Tennessee Code Annotated 651-102, that particular plan of services has two provisions that speak to public hearing. Within that provision, it's an A and a B. So the A portion speaks to the Planning Commission and the requirement for consideration for recommendation to the Planning Commission. You get to that next portion, it speaks to the notice requirements for purposes of adoption of that plan of services. Within that portion, it speaks to the municipality or the governing body, as it's spoken of in that particular statute, being that body that is required to provide all of the notices for purposes of their public hearing. So the public hearing for the commission, as it's written in the statute, is not required in the same way that the public hearing is required for the commission's consideration. Essentially, the way that I read these three together is that while the Planning Commission is considering all three, the Planning Commission is recommending all three to the City Commission for further consideration. And at that point, the notices trigger, as well. At that point, we'd have the resolution that would include the plan of services. And then we would also have, if there was a zoning request, that zoning proposal would also be in there. So I hope that was clear as mud, but I'm happy to answer any questions that y'all might have. And if that doesn't answer the question, feel free and I'll do my best to answer.
Could you generally describe and help me understand the definition of resolution?
So the resolution typically would be prepared by either the legal department or another department within the city, and that resolution would track with or up to would be the City Commission for their consideration. Essentially for us, it may be in the body of an ordinance that they would be adopting.
So we do not, at this Planning Commission level, we're not dealing with a resolution at this point?
There is, to my knowledge, there has been no resolution generated for purposes of your consideration here today.
Okay, that's an important nuance, I think.
So everything relative to notice is at the City Commission level?
For purposes of the public hearing, as I understand it, and what I understand your all's question to be, yes, that notice would be generated at the public hearing. Or that notice for the public hearing would be generated for purposes of the City Commission.
And in turn, we're not responsible for any public hearings relative to the annexation?
No, so you all would have public hearings here on plan of services as outlined in 651-102. You would have a public hearing, but the required notices, as the City Commission is required to abide by, do not necessarily read in the same way or apply to the Planning Commission here. But obviously, it goes out on the agenda, adequate public notice is provided in that way as to having a public hearing or things that are up for consideration by the Planning Commission.
Signs and letters and things like that, we would not be responsible for?
That is not the responsibility of the Planning Commission for purposes of their part in recommending the plan of services annexation or the rezoning, as it were, to the City Commission.
So we could appropriately vote on this today, is what you're saying? Yeah. As far as unfinished business.
Yeah, so that's what I'm hearing is, legal counsel is telling us, the city's legal counsel is telling us, yes, you can.
I'm sorry.
You're within. Well, I would say that to the extent there is a question as to notice, we were not required to provide any additional notice outside of what I understand has been provided already.
Yeah, so we can address the unfinished business today, per law.
That'll be up to y'all.
Yeah, yes, but there's,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so one question, but so we can move forward. I mean, I think I still have a concern. So we have one member of the public who's spoken to. I mean, I understand the technical analysis of it, but probably the public may not. And I think as it pertains to, I'm still struggling to understand the difference between the zoning assignment that comes along with an annexation and why we don't require that be posted when we could be recommending a change of use to a particular piece of property. I don't understand why when something goes through with an annexation, we don't post that. Yet if that piece of property is already within the limits of the municipality, we do require to post it. It would seem prudent, at least, that even if we're not required to do so, and I'm surprised that we wouldn't be. But even if we're not required to do so, why wouldn't we just to be consistent with the process for rezoning another piece of property in the city limits, and in the interests of making sure there's at least a perception of transparency with the public. And I understand that's a policy question more.
Right, so if I understand your question is, why do we not require the same level of notice in a zoning concurrent with an annexation that we would otherwise require for purposes of a city resident in a rezoning request that would require certain notices and certain public hearings? I guess, and this is just me speaking as to attempting to interpret policy, the public hearing would still be afforded to those citizens in front of the city commission. So to the extent that you would have a public hearing or a desire for public hearing, there would be notice provided for the city commission's consideration of that zoning, annexation, and plan of services.
No, understood. I just find it difficult to articulate why we would follow a process in one circumstance and not another. When, again, you may have city residents adjacent to it, and I think Kathy's here to opine on that.
I can address the policy side of that. I think if, and we just had this similar one came up, and I just saw another email on it. I think from a policy perspective, I think if it makes, and I'm following the logic exactly, I think we can do that. The statute doesn't require us to. I think in order to be consistent and apply it so that everybody has a right to know that there's a rezoning or a zoning, technically as it's called, we can do that. It's the statute that just doesn't require it. But we can direct staff to post it even though it's not required.
Would it be posted then twice? Once for the planning and then once for the city commission?
I think we would leave the posting out there.
So it would just stay up?
It would stay up. Is that
So you're
correct?
kind of like doubling work
Well, I
there
think
for
you just
that
move it.
piece then, I guess?
I think you just move it.
One of the signs, like the annexation sign that gets posted after the primary resolution calls for the public hearing, has that date and time and location of the city commission public hearing. So we have the annexation, like rezoning type signs that are low to the ground, but then the new one from this bill has us put that date and time of the public hearing, which is why it's posted after that primary resolution.
Okay.
So we post it twice, essentially.
That makes sense why the city would want to just do it once then, I guess. Okay.
Well, I think the city can take that under advisement with our sentiments expressed. I agree that I think it appears to be inconsistent that we would provide that notice for a simple rezoning, but we wouldn't provide that notice for an annexation and a first zoning. So this feels a little inconsistent to me. And I think for transparency, it would help improve our standing with the community to be more open. So let's proceed back to the agenda item at hand. Callie, would you come back, please?
Okay, good evening, commissioners. I'll try to make this brief.
Welcome back.
Why should you be different?
Oh,
'Cause I'm
don't worry about
hungry.
that.
I'm hungry. I have a cookie to finish. So this is the voluntary annexation of approximately 3.9 acres located along the Bobby Hicks Highway for a state DMV. For a refresher, the property owners requested this annexation. It is contiguous to the city limit, and the applicant is seeking a zoning assignment of planned community business district. The county zoning is currently general business district, or B3, and general agricultural district, A1. The future land use map from 2020 has this rezoning or zoning assignment. It is in alignment with that proposed land use, and it is also in alignment with our draft 2045 future land use map. As I noted last time, a concept plan is not required. This is just shown for demonstrative purposes. There will be a skills testing course on site. And then for the plan of services, all of these departments have weighed in on this annexation, and the expense is the $290 upfront for the water sewer extension, and then the revenue, which would be from property taxes, would be $214,445. Staff recommends approval of the zoning assignment and the plan of services, given the property is adjacent to the city limits and within our urban growth boundary. The proposed zoning assignment also aligns with the future land use districts, and the annexation is supported by the Bridge Plan Policy 1.18, which states any annexation, hold on, I've got it verbatim. Bridge policy states that any annexation that requests water or sewer within the urban service area has a right to do that. And then the request will have limited impact on the existing services in the area. Here's your all's options. You can approve. If denied, the discussion with the developer would need to occur to find an appropriate zoning. The recommendation of the plan of services is sent to the Board of Commissioners, and then to defer study prior to returning commission for reconsideration.
Thank you very much. Questions for staff? Seeing none, I think the question now resolves to us. I think we have left this meeting, this item from last month when we had not had an accurate cost analysis. Looking forward 10 years. I think it's improved from being a significant negative to a lesser negative fiscally for the city of Johnson City. Any comments about that?
I guess I still have a problem. In 10 years, we're still in the black, or in the red. So I'm not sure we've improved. I don't feel good about it, just from that perspective.
Do we have a sense of how often this type of annexation occurs where it takes more than a decade to recoup?
So, I mean, I can just speaking from other experience, not in terms of how long one may expect to recoup particular investments. But I think, even if I remember, Mr. Rollinger is here, so he can certainly contradict me. But in a circumstance, from a developer's perspective, in a circumstance where a specific development triggers the requirement for infrastructure improvement off-site, be that signal intersections, be that water and sewer extensions, to the extent that that infrastructure improvement only benefits that one property, it's common for the developer to pay for that. I mean, and that's really what I'm struggling with here. On building on what Bob is saying, I really don't have a problem with the land use, but I struggle with the notion that the existing tax base of Johnson City would subsidize this development. So I mean, I think if there's I know the developer is. I know the developer is here. I don't know if there've been discussions with city administration regarding an obligation for the developer to extend the sanitary service to the site. I think that's entirely reasonable. If that were the case, I could happily support the annexation.
Let me ask for clarification on the staff. The extension, there's adjacent properties that are also being considered in the proposed land use that are not developed yet, correct? They haven't been included in the plan of services, have they?
No.
But if they are developed, they would add to the tax revenue, would they not?
I believe so, yes.
You know, if we just in my experience, if we followed that policy where we didn't extend to some of these locations, Johnson City would be half the size it is now. I recall about a number of years ago, the water and sewer, we extended it out by $2.5 million, where there wasn't anything out there except a property way out there in the distance. It was called the Ridges. When you have a isolated site out here that's being developed in a commercial corridor, you're going to have this, with this style of annexation where you can't go out and, or you're not annexing an entire region or an area, you're going to have this spot zoning that's going to take place. You've got to get some utilities to it. You've got to extend the infrastructure out there to it, and the other properties, as they develop, will add to that tax base over time. That's not being considered here in this plan of services. So,
Steve, I agree with your comments. However, if I recall, I thought the topography around the adjacent properties was, I don't want to say undevelopable, but it was a challenge.
Mr. Ollinger, maybe you can help clarify for us, but I mean, I generally agree as well. I think in this particular circumstance, again, if my recollection is correct, and I think we're talking about 200-300 feet that we're extending the line is required to be extended. So there just aren't that many more properties that you could add on to this thing if they wanted to add on anyway at some point in the future. But I don't think it was, I didn't recall it being a tremendous.
Which way do I need to go to get to a map? Is there a map on here? Okay. Unfortunately, I can't zoom in. If I recall correctly, Mr. Dutton, it's about 700 feet. This was, this property sits on a crest along the road there, and we could drain it to the south or we could drain it to the north. Everything to the south, let's see. So this property here is currently undeveloped, and there's quite a few obstacles with the topography. There's an embankment here, and the additional properties to cross. Going to the north, it would open up service to an existing business. If I'm not mistaken, it's a mechanic shop. And so there's really three options. We could put a pump in, and nobody really likes pumps. We try to avoid them if at all possible. And sometimes we have to do that if we can't hit the timeline. But there's actually three options. We could put a pump in and pump it up to Cedar Creek Road down at this neighborhood here, or you could drain it to the north or to the south. But the most viable option was to drain it to the north, and it was about 700 feet, and the cost was $290, I believe. Yeah. Does that help at all? It does open up service to additional properties that don't currently have it, so that's one positive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Further discussion?
Is there an option to approve the zoning but not the plan of services, or is that a question for staff?
Thank you.
My question is, can we approve the zoning assignment? Do you have to also include the approval of the plan of services?
I think we're in a position to recommend to the city commission as our position, and if we can't really approve a zoning assignment without sending with it a plan of service that matches that. I don't think that's an option.
Yeah. Okay.
I end up driving this road quite a bit, and I always wonder why some of this hasn't been built out, and it makes sense now why some of this hasn't been built out heading to the airport. I would lean towards approving it and then letting the city commission decide since they do the budget, if they decide that this is an appropriate way to spend the money or not for the city. Because as far as land use goes and where this is, it makes sense to extend services in this area because this is a growth area for our city. But that's just my opinion on it.
they had the same thing going on with this particular quadrant, where they had to, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but they had to extend a sewer pump station out on the corner of 75 and the Kingsport Highway, I think behind it when they four-laned it, because there was no sewer out there. There was no water out there. And so when they four-laned the highway, they added those utilities in and extended them past that intersection in order to enable businesses to be developed out there. One of the problems they've had with the development from Gray proper in that city on down to the Kingsport Highway has been the lack of services, gas, water, every time there's been something developed on that road, it's by one lot, and then they have to extend the water or the gas, and then another lot, and they have to extend the water, and it's been an absolute nightmare for anyone who goes along that corridor and tries to put something and develop something that is out there. So at some point, this piecemeal process is going to have to be fixed in order to go out there and go all the way down through that corridor in order to make it happen. This is going to be a recurring problem if we continue to see development out there without enabling them to go forward and extend these infrastructures.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have a question before us.
I'm going to throw it out here as if it can be voted up or voted down, but we'll go ahead and get it on the table anyway. I'm going to vote for approval.
You gonna make a
Or,
motion?
excuse me, I'm going to make a motion for approval. And we'll see what happens.
So you're moving to recommend approving the annexation and zoning assignment of B5 with the attached plan of services that has been presented?
That's
So I
correct.
have a motion.
That's correct.
I'll second the motion.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Heather, please call the roll.
Mayor Hunter,
Oh, yes.
Commissioner Aldridge,
Yes.
Commissioner Cooper,
Yes.
Commissioner Oshinbaum,
Yes.
Commissioner Goodson,
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly,
Yes.
Commissioner Williams,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Dutton,
Yes. Chairman
Dagenhart.
Yes. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That's the end of our agenda. Hearing nothing else to come before us, I'll adjourn the meeting at 8 o'clock.